Tuesday, everybody. For those of you that are returning, thanks again. For first-time visitors, we appreciate your interest in Alaska first and foremost, and we're excited to share a little insider look at the way Alaska is viewed through the lens of John Hall's Alaska. Denali is unique relative to our other national parks, especially those in the lower 48. Like our eldest, Yellowstone. Many of you have probably been to Yellowstone. You can drive your own vehicles in there. You can see the geysers. You can see the buffalo herd or the elk. That cannot be done in Denali National Park. You'll see where this red line ends right here at mile 15. And you'll see here it says private vehicles are restricted to the first 15 miles of the park. Even our commercial vehicles with our backgrounds and back checks and driver history and all of that. Our commercial vehicles are limited to only 2 miles inside the park here, and that's to the Denali Park Visitor Center. If you want to travel into the park on one of these wilderness tours or wildlife sightings tours, you have to take one of the sanctioned tours, and there's 3 programs. There is the Natural History Tour, which comes in to mile 29. It's about a 4-hour trip. There's the Tundra Wilderness Tour, which will travel from the Visitor Center in 62 miles to Stony Hill Overlook. That's a good trip. It's about an 8-hour trip in total. So you come in 62 miles and then go back out 62 miles. Chance of seeing the animals, the moose, the caribou, the sheep, the bear, much, much greater. I'd say 10 to 1 greater than what guests see in the first 30 miles of the park. That's just simply, of course, doubling your time, doubling your distance, and getting a much better tour. For our guests, like I said, we're going to take you to a place called Kantishna. And for many of our summertime visitors, they're actually going to spend 2 nights back here inside the park. Now, you're probably wondering, how is that possible? How can you have a resort or a hotel or lodge inside a national park? Well, up until the expansion of the park in 1980, when it became a park and preserve, this portion of the park right here was privately owned. And this is where the prospectors came in 1905 for the Kantishna Gold Rush. So when that park expanded, the resorts there's 3 lodges back there. They were governed, or they were grandfathered in and allowed to continue to operate. So at the end of mile 92.5, something that all 1,000 visitors that we take to Denali every summer get a chance to witness is the beautiful Backcountry Lodge. And when we talk about customizing your adventure in Alaska or building your own adventure, this is really kind of the starting point. We learned that, probably about 10, 12 years ago, that people liked to have options. Again, just like dining, not everybody wants to eat salmon every night. Not everybody wants to eat prime rib every night. So by going into a destination like the Backcountry Lodge, there's a number of activities that are available to you as part of your stay. They're not necessarily added on. You've got the options for mountain biking and hiking, and you can take a self-guided trail. You can go out berry picking. You can go fishing right here in Moose Creek, which I'll show you a picture of momentarily. Or you can take the shuttle buses that they operate, which will drive 6 miles back on the park road and take you to Wonder Lake, where you can spend the day hiking, berry picking, and fishing. You can do the trifecta while you're there. Now, there is one optional tour that the lodge, and actually just up the hill here is an operator called Kantishna Air Taxi. They will actually operate flight scene trips off this runway right here, and I like to call that Kantishna International. And these little Cessna 206s and 205s will fly up off that gravel runway, and they'll fly up around Denali and through Gunsight Pass, and you'll get a chance to see the park from above, which is really fascinating, but also to bear witness to how massive that big ice-covered rock really is. Puts in perspective how little we are in this great big world. So if you wanted to do a flight scene trip, that's something you could certainly do while you're here in Kantishna. But the other activities where you get to kind of design your own adventure as you go during your stay here starts with gold panning. Of course, everybody's given a little satchel of salted dirt as a little thank you from us to you and from the lodge to you for joining us and staying with us in Kantishna. But remember, this creek right here, Moose Creek, was destination to a major gold rush, one of the biggest in Alaska. So we'll get a lot of people that will just come down here with a pan and grab a pair of the rubber boots that are available to you, and they'll sit down here and work the shores, and they'll find a little of their own gold right there out of Moose Creek. So that's certainly something you can do. Before mentioned hikes, you can do a self-guided hike on the trails or walk the road if you wanted to walk back to beautiful Wonder Lake. It's about a 6-mile walk, or you can take the mountain bikes. When you are out on these walks, do remember you're in wilderness. Not very many bears back here in Kantishna. In fact, I can't ever recall myself coming in encounter with one. I know they're there, but generally they don't like human beings and the sight or sound that we make. They tend to run the other direction, but not uncommon to see moose back there in Kantishna, especially. And I thought this is just a great picture, kind of right of way, who's in charge when you're out here in the wilderness. You see that beautiful moose walking across the road. The guided hikes that the hotel offers take you up to Blueberry Hill. Again, if you're there in the fall, this is particular time of year, late August. All these low-lying plants right here. You've got dwarf plants and low-lying berry bushes, and they actually have berry picking cages that have forks on them, and you can scoop down through those berries, and just those fresh berries are fantastic. And like I said, if you want to do the trifecta while you're here, you can do the hiking, the biking, and also the fishing. You can go down here to Wonder Lake and do a little fishing. They've got fly rods and spin cast rods. Now, full disclosure, I've probably spent somewhere north of 15 hours fishing in Wonder Lake. And much like the muskies in Wisconsin, which I've spent a lot of time throwing rods at and lures at, I've never caught a muskie in Wisconsin. I've never caught a fish in Wonder Lake. But when your backdrop is Denali itself in the Alaska range, and I have had moments where I've been fishing there and Mother Moose will come down to get a drink of water, fishing kind of becomes secondary at that point. That's just a pretty moving moment that can be had when you're in Kantishna. And of course, if you're fishing right there near the lodge, they've got Dolly Varden, which you see here, type of trout. They've also got grayling, and you can fish right there at the lodge with spinning rods, or again, fly rods. And then at the end of the day, sitting around the fire, singing Kumbaya, roasting marshmallows, making s'mores. This is like what I like to say high-level adult camping should be. You've got the cozy environment of your cabin, where if it's cool in the fall or early in the summer, you've got, of course, heat to control that. If it's a warm summer day, say in the 80s, which can happen in Denali, open up that window on your cabin and let that breeze blow through and cool you down as you listen to the waters of Moose Creek sweep by. So Denali, like I said, is featured on all of our summer programs, and this trips into Kantishna and overnights there on many of our tours. A couple other trips that I want to focus on this evening when it comes to building your own adventure starts with the fish and float. This is a really exciting new itinerary for us. In fact, we are seeing so much demand for this trip that we're actually increasing the number of departures in 2022. But this is a great trip. It starts and ends in Anchorage. It's really built to be a land-only program. If you're following along in our catalog, it's on pages 36, 37, 38, 39. But it, of course, starts in Anchorage. We'll actually head to Homer, Alaska, and spend a couple of nights down there in Homer, after a night in Alyeska, and then we'll come back up to the Knik River and then on to Denali for a couple of nights before we head back into Anchorage. The adventure part of this itinerary, really that I want to focus on this evening, takes place here in Homer. Homer is my wife's favorite city. One of my favorite places is on the Kenai River, which will follow to and from Homer. And I just wanted to put this slide in here because as part of the tour, you'll actually take a rafting trip down the beautiful emerald blue waters of the Kenai. But this house right here, I've had my eye on since I first went to Cooper Landing, Alaska in 2004. And someday, if somehow I hit the lottery, I plan on buying that property right there. That's my favorite property along the Kenai River. But that's right at the mouth of Kenai Lake where it dumps into the Kenai River. But Homer, like I said, my wife's favorite city in the state. I go back and forth between Valdez and Sitka on which is my favorite. They're all great, but Homer certainly is gorgeous. It sits along Ketchmack Bay, glaciers surrounding the mountains around it. One of the must-sees in Homer, of course, is the Salty Dog Saloon. And then during your adventure day here in Homer, you get to choose from a few wonderful items. Of course, fishing is really king in Homer. Homer is the halibut capital of Alaska. Of course, halibut and salmon. This is a yellow eye. That's a type of a rockfish. I think that's one of the most fascinating fish. And you'll have a full day's charter that you'll go out in groups of 6 maximum on a boat and spend a full day out there, salmon, halibut, or rockfish, depending on, of course, the time of year, but salmon, halibut being primary. Another option is a flight scene trip with a float plane, where you'll actually take off on a float plane like you see here, this de Havilland Beaver. And then with that, there's the idea that you can also go to see the coastal brown bears outside of Homer over on the Katmai Peninsula. Katmai coast. Yes, these bears are free to roam as they please. There's no viewing platforms, there's no cages, but these guides who see these bears on a daily basis will keep you well informed, give you a little bit of bear school before you land there. But what an awesome experience to walk on the shores with these massive brown bears in the Halo Bay and Geographic Bay area of Alaska. Great group photo right there of the dozen that did this trip a couple of years ago. Brewery tours are also an option, a hike to the lagoon and a visit to an operating oyster farm. We get a chance to learn about the oysters and also do a little oyster shucking. So that day in Homer, 2 nights there, that full day gives you the flexibility to spend some time out on the spit, see the fishermen coming in with their catch from the day, enjoy dinner at one of the local venues, and then that next day, of course, you get to choose. Do I want to go to the oyster farm in the lagoon? Do I want to take the bear viewing adventure, or do I want to go fishing? You get to choose what fits best for you. And just because your spouse wants to go fishing and you want to go to the lagoon and do the oyster farm, that doesn't mean you don't have to both do the same thing. You can certainly separate and choose whatever fits your desires. The Untamed Alaska is another great itinerary that actually highlights numerous days where you have the opportunity to choose your own adventure. This, again, is really a land-only program. We're getting so many more clients in the era of COVID that they're looking for more land-based programs, more locally enriching programs. And, of course, I think the idea of getting on large vessels until we see how things are going to pan out in the next 6 months with vaccines, and we see some responses by the industry. These small group tours like we're offering of 24, this seems to be a very hot ticket as we enter into 2021. So with this particular tour, the destination that I'm going to focus on during this 11-day itinerary, you'll see it starts in Anchorage. We'll go to Talkeetna, love Talkeetna. We'll spend 3 nights in Denali on this trip. We actually spend 2 nights in Kantishna and a night at the edge of the park. And then we'll do a trip across what's known as the Denali Highway, very scenic byway, and down into Valdez, where you'll have a couple of days in the coastal regions, viewing the glaciers, the Columbia and Mears Glacier. And then you'll end up here in Cordova on nights 8 and 9. And Cordova is, again, one of my favorite cities. It seems like these coastal communities are hard to beat when it comes to Alaska, but I love Cordova and I love the destination in which we spend our time. This is called the Orca Adventure Lodge. The Orca Adventure Lodge was actually an old cannery. Cordova, for those of you that haven't been a part of my program before, sits right at the mouth of the very famous Copper River. So if you see that Copper River salmon each May and early June coming online in your local grocery stores, this is the area that comes from, these waters right here, as those salmon stack up and get ready to enter into the Copper River. Of course, the commercial fishermen don't catch them in the river itself, but those fish were born and hatched and moved out to sea from the Copper River, hence the name the Copper River salmon. But it's really incredible here to wake up in the morning, to walk out on your patio or to walk outside and sip a cup of coffee and see a raft of otters, as we call it, a raft, where they're all schooled up like that, swimming together. Pretty common occurrence. Or to see, a pod of orcas swimming by. And if you want more of that wilderness and marine wildlife, you actually have, as part of your adventure day, the option to add a sightseeing trip on the vessels out into the waters to see more of the orcas, more of the humpback whales and the sea lions and sea otters, puffins, eagles, and other marine wildlife along the way. Again, another fishing option for you. I did mention that Cordova sits right there at the mouth of the Copper River. So really good king salmon fishing in June. That's when the kings and sockeyes are making their run. If you're coming later in the summer, August, one of my favorite times to fish is August because of the coho or silver salmon run that takes place. They're a little bit bigger. I like the balance of lean meat to fat ratio on the coho, probably as much as any of the salmon. A lot of people like the sockeyes or the reds, but I personally prefer the coho. I think it's a really good balance. And so a day to go out and catch kings, like I said. There's Ken, he caught that beautiful king, that'd be 2 summers ago, out there at Prince William Sound. And you might catch a shrimp. So some people catch kings, and people like Matt, well, they catch shrimps because he's a shrimp. But we'll show you more pictures of Matt's fishing later. So fishing is in your on your spectrum of things to do. The Untamed Alaska, again, much like the Fish and Float, an option for you where it's part of your tour. Some of the other adventures that you have the ability to sift through and choose from while you're in Cordova. They do guided hikes to the beautiful Sheridan Glacier. It's more than just a hike and a walk to the glacier here. Obviously, nature-led. Get to learn about the berries, the tundra or the taiga forest, the floral and fauna. Look at Alaska. Do some berry picking along the way as well, and then a chance to see the glacier. For those that are a little bit more adventurous, if you want to do that trip to the glacier, but then have a chance to actually kayak to the glacier, you can do that as well. And that is awesome, to kayak amongst those massive pieces of ice. And again, here, these ice formations that you see floating in the water around you, that's only 10% of that iceberg. The rest of it is down below the water level there. A lot of them get caught up in what's known as the terminal moraine. And then really one of the primary reasons we ever started visiting Cordova about 25 years ago was a glacier called Child's Glacier. And Child's Glacier came right up to the river and also met the area that was known as the $1 Million Bridge. And Cordova itself is a very historical community in Alaska. Some of you have probably listened to some of my previous programs where we talked about Wrangell St. Elias National Park and the very historic Kennecott copper mines. Well, the Kennecott copper mines, which pulled more rich copper out of Alaska than any other mining project during its operation from 1910 to 1930, they had to figure out a way to get that copper out of Kennecott. And if you're looking at maps, Kennecott in McCarthy is about 190 miles due east of Anchorage, Alaska, right inside Wrangell St. Elias National Park. But in order to get that copper and silver out of the mine up in Kennecott, they built this railway, the Copper River Railway, that brought the copper and the silver down to the city of Cordova. And there's actually a bridge there that cost $1 million at the time, of course, 1910. You can imagine $1 million proposition to build that railway and get that across the delta there. Now, when it comes to adventure, I know some of you are going to think I'm absolutely crazy when I say this, but March has become one of my favorite times to be in Alaska. If you were to put me on the spot, I love the 25th or probably like the 20th of August through about the 10th of September. There's so much going on at that time. You have the fall colors kicking in, the berries are popping. You've got the wildlife tends to be moving around a little bit more. It's a little cooler, so you can wake up with those crisp mornings. And then on top of that, you do have a chance in late August and into September to see the Aurora Borealis. If Aurora Borealis is something you really desire to see, then coming to Alaska in March is a home run. Every time I've been up for our Iditarod program or for our Alaska Winter Wonders, every guest has gone home with at least a wow moment. It doesn't happen every night, all night, but when you go to a place like Fairbanks and spend 3, 4, 5 nights in that vicinity, your chances of seeing the aurora, especially in the month of March, are incredibly great. I'm going to say well above 90%, 99%. And again, it's a small group atmosphere. Of course, we're celebrating Hanukkah right now. So when I was building my slide program, I couldn't hesitate but put in, of course, the 8 crazy nights that you have on these programs, like the Winter Wonders tour, where you spend 8 days in Alaska. And it is the Festival of Lights. But again, the Festival of Lights in Alaska in March it's like a religious experience. it has put people in tears because of the emotional connection that these light shows can present to a person. And this is actually a photo that I took about, I think, 4 years ago. And I just want you to see, this picture was taken from the back deck of the Talkeetna, Alaska Lodge at about 2 o'clock in the morning. That is Denali, the 20,000 foot mountain, 80 miles away. There is so much aurora activity here that it's literally backlighting the Alaska range. And in clear daylight, it feels like you can see that mountain 80 miles away. So, you know, those moments happen, and it's pretty impressive. And that's one of the reasons I love Alaska in the winter, primarily in the month of March, because as you get closer to the equinox, the light viewing in Alaska tends to be the best. Of course, one of the big adventures outside of the crazy night light shows that we have, the Festival of Lights, is the Iditarod itself. We do have that Iditarod adventure that runs generally the very end of February, first part of March every year. The Iditarod itself, its ceremonial start is always down 4th Avenue in Anchorage on the first Saturday of March. So then that following day, Sunday, the official start takes place out here in Willow, Alaska, where these dog teams take off every 2 minutes out of the chutes and make their journey towards Nome, Alaska. It's not for the faint of heart. You know, people who make this journey to Nome, for a vast majority of them, of the 75 entries that this race will see each year, I would say probably 60 to 65 of them are just hoping to make it to Nome. There's generally only about 8 to 10 that are in it to win it. Because to run 1,000 miles with a dog sled team, and the winners nowadays do that in about 8 days, 12 hours. It's pretty impressive. And to battle the environment and Mother Nature, and to take on 50-mile-an-hour winds coming off the Norton Sound and 45 or 50 below zero in the middle of the night where it's just you and your 16 dogs, takes a pretty special person. There's 2 things I told people long ago I will never do. After experiencing the Iditarod for the first time, that was one of them. It takes a brave man or a really strong person, woman, to make that journey, for sure. The other thing is, of course, to climb Denali. I just think that's not meant for the human body to climb to 20,000 feet, but of course, about 2,000 people every year accomplish that feat, or it's set forth to accomplish that feat. Of course, not all of them make it to the top of Denali. But with these winter tours, adventure days are really abundant again, whether we're in Anchorage or Fairbanks. You're going to have opportunities to again, customize your own adventure. In Anchorage, clients get to go on a brewery tour or a sightseeing and photograph tour, or what's probably the most popular is a flight scene tour out of Anchorage, right off of Lake Hood. These seaplanes that you saw in the summer months, they take their floats off and they put skis on during the winter months, and they'll take off right off the snow and ice, and they will come out here to a place called the Knik Glacier, where you'll literally land on the ice and get a chance to walk up to that glacial ice and touch the face of the glacier. That, again, something you don't get to do during the summer because this is all open water during the summer months here. And the blues are so blue that, again, I don't think words can describe how incredible that is. To walk into one of those ice caves, to see that oxygen that's trapped inside that ice that creates those different shades of blue. This is something that very few places across the globe can offer, unfortunately, and Alaska is certainly the best opportunity. Even those places like New Zealand and Canada don't have quite the glacials opportunities that we do in Alaska today. Of course, also in Fairbanks, the idea that you have the opportunity to choose between some other winter adventures like snowshoeing or cross-country skiing, or of course, one of my favorites, dog sledding. We'll come to the Trailbreaker Kennels. Here's Dave Munson's house. I had mentioned Dave earlier, and he'll take us on dog sledding tours through his property, but you'll also have a chance to do that at other destinations in Fairbanks as well, where you can go on some longer dog sledding trips. And of course, you're bundled up well. They've got blankets over the top of you. March in Alaska, average temperature in Anchorage is actually pretty close to the freezing point, about 30 degrees Fahrenheit is the average temperature the first part of March. Up in Fairbanks, it's still right around 0 to 2 degrees on average. I've been in Fairbanks when it's 25 below, and I'll say this tongue in cheek, it's a dry cold, just like Phoenix is a dry heat. but it really is a dry cold. Growing up in Minnesota, 20 or 25 below in Minnesota is hellacious compared to 20 or 25 below in Fairbanks. They don't get a lot of wind. It's a very dry climate. In fact, it's so dry, it's actually almost considered a desert. They get about 12 inches of precipitation annually in Fairbanks, Alaska. So it's actually much more comfortable when it's zero than you would think, but you're bundled up appropriately as you make that journey. Now, when you're dog sledding, the one caution that I will say to you, the view that changes is only that of the lead dog. So you got a lot of fuzzy butts in front of you. But one of the cool encounters, which I understand can be a bit dangerous for these dog teams at times, is that you see that moose right there. She ran right out of the woods and started running along the trail because they don't like being in shoulder deep snow any more than you or I would. And so they try to find these groom paths that the dog teams or the snowmobiles have pushed down, and they tend to stand out on those and walk around. So again, a lot of our activities when it comes to the adventure side are done during the day, and then you can stay up all night if you want and watch the aurora. Of course, like I said, cross-country skiing, very popular also while we're in Fairbanks out at the remote lodges. Snowshoeing, and again, even for those that have never done this, it's pretty incredible how easily you can take to snowshoeing and how purposeful and how scientific the design of those snowshoes to keep you on top of that snow as you hike through the beautiful snow-covered trees. If you're real adventurous and you've got to feel the horsepower between your legs, and of course many of you, I'm sure, in Minnesota and Wisconsin have tried this, but those coming from Texas and Arizona and Florida, they always want to get on a snowmobile or snow machine as they call it in Alaska. A couple of different trips that we have opportunities to take. One of them, of course, will actually take you out to see the pipeline outside of Fairbanks there, the Alaska pipeline that flows from Prudhoe Bay 800 miles south to Valdez, Alaska. And who's not up for a good snowball fight? Not that this, I guess it's an option. You don't have to participate, but this is something that, I think to me sums up winter in Alaska, winter in March. And look at that backdrop. This picture also taken from Talkeetna, where some clients obviously built a snowman. Maybe they're I guess friend for the week, friend for the few nights that they're there. But then look at that backdrop. You've got Denali in the background there. You've got Moose's Tooth as well. A beautiful, beautiful setting across the Alaska range. And when on these winter programs, guests get a chance to go to Alyeska, like on the Winter Wonders program. Downhill skiing is an option. This is the Alyeska Resort, surrounded by 7 glaciers and the beautiful, this would be a portion of the Cook Inlet. This is Turnagain Arm right here that comes up off of Cook Inlet and the Pacific Ocean. This area right here is actually home to some of the largest tidal shifts in the world. We get what are called bore tides, where you can literally see the wall of water moving in or out of this Turnagain Arm area. Those shifts can be in the upwards of 25 to 30 feet in terms of the tidal shifts. But some great skiing as you come down the Alyeska Mountain. If you're not into skiing, again, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, or maybe after 7-8 days in the cold, you just want to go to the spa, you do have that as an option as well. So again, kind of creating your own adventure and then going to dinner at your leisure, but still part of the package with these programs. We do have one cruise partner where creating your own adventure is a reality. With many cruise lines, of course, you're adding activities or attractions or what they call as shore excursions or along the itinerary. But with our small boat partner, Alaska Dream Cruises, this is our vessel where we actually overnight on the vessel itself for 7 days. It's a 50-passenger vessel, sails through the true inside passage itself between Juneau and Sitka, with stops in Tracy Arm, Wrangell, Petersburg, Icy Strait, and Glacier Bay along the way. But when we're in places like Glacier Bay or Icy Strait or Tracy Arm, we have the opportunity to allow clients to either get on the Dib, which is this raft that you see right here that holds 12 to 15 people, and go out and do some whale watching or get a little closer to the glaciers. Or if you want to take, again, another more active approach to it, you can do a little sea kayaking up towards the face of the glacier or towards towards the whales as well. Can't get too close to the whales, of course, not allowed by federal law, but it's pretty neat to see Alaska from that perspective, from water level, and to just go into some of those remote bays and enjoy the pure wilderness of the Inside Passage. That's a pretty special opportunity. Now, I had mentioned early on that we do get a few families that'll travel with us to Alaska. Something we developed specifically for those multi-generational families is our Junior Explorer program. And what this does is it allows for the grandparents and the parents to do the adult items, like, of course, the shows or one of the attractions or activities, or go have a nice dinner as a group of adults. And then while the adults are doing their more adult-centric items, the kids are doing their own activities. And we have our own John Hall's Alaska representatives that go with the kids to participate in these wilderness evenings, where they learn, of course, about the importance of fire and fire safety in Talkeetna, or they learn about the Park Service and the wilderness and the floral and fauna of Denali at the Denali Education Center. And of course, then we'll have hot dogs and pizzas and maybe roast marshmallows and make s'mores over the fire with them. So it's really an opportunity for the kids to have their own vacation while the adults are still having their vacation. And not something we offer with all tours, but we do have a couple select itineraries where we can offer the Junior Explorer program. And then for those that are coming to Alaska on any one of our itineraries, always know that something we feel very strongly about is the idea that it shouldn't be in our vocabulary. That's something that John Sr. taught me at the age of maybe 13 or 14 when I was bussing tables in our family restaurant and hotel in Minnesota at the Anderson House. He said, if you're telling people we can't deliver, then they're going to go elsewhere to get what they want. And that methodology or philosophy is carried over to Alaska in our operations today. And the fact is, if we have people that are coming to Alaska in July and they want to go see this very iconic place called Brooks Falls and see the brown bears eating the salmon, we can absolutely book that and dovetail it into your package. So any of these land and cruise packages, if there's things that you want to do that you don't see in the itinerary, please don't ever hesitate to ask. Brooks Falls and Katmai during the month of July will get in the upwards of about 300 visitors a day. In total, they've been averaging around 16,000 to 18,000 visitors throughout the summer, but a bulk of those visitors are coming during the month of July to see those brown bears feeding on the salmon. And I'm sure you've seen those iconic pictures where the bear's catching the salmon out of the air as he jumps out of the water. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen in Denali, even though I've seen operators use that as a promotional photo for Denali National Park. That is Katmai National Park. And Katmai is located about 150 miles southwest, 180 miles southwest of Anchorage, Alaska. So you fly over here for a day trip on those small planes and spend about 6 to 8 hours here inside the park. If you're a fisherman, outdoor person, you want to go on a multi-day float trip, or you want to go fishing for spotted for trout or dolly varden, or maybe try your hand at fly fishing for a king salmon on a remote Alaska river, yes, absolutely, that can be done. And there's certain species that run at certain times of the summer. So certainly something you just have to ask about or inquire about with us before you make those reservations, because we'll make the reservations on your behalf. We can certainly customize that as well. And if you're, again, I'll go back to the fishing. If you're excited about the idea of fishing, I showed you Matt's little shrimp earlier. Well, this is his bigger shrimp. Matt's about a 6'2" man, about 240, 250 pounds. And that fish right there is almost as tall as he is, weighing about 135 pounds right there is that halibut. Mine wasn't as big, but I'm still proud to show mine off. He weighed about 90 pounds. And I'm just under 6 foot tall. So those opportunities, again, May and June, great halibut fishing out of Seward. As you get into July, that's when the salmon run really takes place, and you can do combination fishing trips. And then into about August is when the halibut and salmon fishing start to slow down a little bit in the summer. Again, I just want to say thank you very much again for your time on this Tuesday evening, and I wish you all the best in 2021 and beyond. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.